Hello, and thank you for joining us today for the Download Community Tech Talks. These are community tech talks for the HPCC Systems community by the HPCC Systems community, and we're thrilled that you could join us today. So please share. Let other people know that you're here with us, or if you've heard something that's interesting, please share it. Use the hashtag HPCC Tech Talks. And also, please ask questions. We welcome your questions, and we will address as many of them as we can after each speaker. Throughout each one of the presentations, our speakers will have polls. So please look for those at the bottom of your screen. And if for some reason you can't see those, exit the full screen mode and refresh your screen. We do welcome your feedback. At the end of the session, please rate us and visit the blog. We should have a recap up within the week after each one of these. And if you'd like to be one of our featured speakers, we would absolutely love to have you. Send us a note at techtalks@hpccsystems.com, or even if you just have an idea for something you'd like to hear, please drop us a note. So at this point, I'm going to turn everything over to Flavio for our community announcements.
Thank you very much, Jessica, and thank you everyone for being here. I think this is going to be yet another great presentation. We have three speakers. One of them is a speaker from the community, and I'll get to what he will talk about in a moment. Before that, there are a few interesting topics to mention. One is we have our latest Gold version, which is 6.4.16. And hopefully, if we don't see any other issues with this version, this might end up being one of the last builds that we have for the 6.4 version as we work towards 7.0. Our 7.0 version is about to be frozen now. We might have that freeze as soon as maybe Monday. And we will be having a beta version released probably within the next few weeks. So stay tuned for that. And please, as soon as the beta is out, go and test. There are plenty of great new features there. They add new capabilities, certainly, and they add also better performance in new systems with lots of cores, with the ability to offload processing. So this is really, really a positively disruptive release. It will have tons of good things that the community has been looking for over the last year or so, or a couple of years. So stay tuned and take the build, test it, and let us know what you think. And if, again, as usual, if you see something that you believe that you can contribute on, please let us know and send your code. We have online a link to the changelog, by the way, for the 6.4.16 version. There are only a few things that have been changed there, so if you want to take a look as well, just take a look at that as well and upgrade us as you need. There are a number of recent blogs that we have released. There is a very interesting blog on the Myriad interface. This is for machine learning. Roger Dev has published a blog that explains how we have built an interface that allows you to deal with all of these problems that can be partitioned into small little problems. For example, you're trying to run a machine learning algorithm to train some regression model on data from the US, and you want to train this model as local models in each one of the counties in the US. And that would be essentially the equivalent of training hundreds or thousands of different little models with different little partitions of data. Well, we have now the mechanisms, the instrumentation for you to run this thing as a single job and then partition this job across all of the nodes and run them in parallel with the almost perfect scalability. So please, if you are looking for some of these type of problems into machine learning and to solve them on HPCC, take a look at that blog. I think they will open your mind on how you can do that very easily with what you have available today. We have also a couple other blogs that are very good as well. There is one on how to build in general a homogeneous big data ecosystem with HPCC, and there is one around autonomous vehicle risk management or risk analysis. So please go to the blogs, take a look. The links are on the screen right now. And we have an upcoming webinar. So if you are listening to this, most likely you are interested in things that are happening in the community. And if you'd like to know more of what HPCC can do for customer engagement and some of the possibilities for data analytics that allow you to build better predictions and better customer knowledge, this is a great webinar to come. So please take a look. There is a link on the screen again, and join the webinar as well. This webinar will have an active presentation, a very interesting presentation from Anirudh, who is one of our community members in India and founder of 3Lock Labs. This is yet another important topic. There is the HPCC Community Day coming. This will be in October. It will be again in Georgia, in Buckhead. We will have hopefully a very dense day with information and plenty of community activities around the day. But we have also a pre-day, as we have done in previous years, with posters, competitions, and workshops. So please, if you think that you have an interesting topic that you can present and or that you can participate in any way, including poster submissions and maybe enrolling yourself in some of these workshops or presenting some content on activities that you have done with the community and or projects that you have handled, please let us know. We do need to hear from you. We want to build something that can be useful and appealing to a large group of community members, and hopefully we can have you there too. And there are, for those that are interested in sponsoring the event, same as we had done last year, we have sponsorship packages for community members that would like to have something displayed for other community members to be shown during the presentation. So please let us know if you want to sponsor as well. Now, going into our presentations for today, we have, as I mentioned before, three very good topics covered. One is Ty. Ty is one of the community members that has been with us, involved with us for some time now, for a few years, and he is also the director of the robotics program for an instructor as well for one of the schools in South Florida. And he has been with us during the last Community Day in 2017 as well. If you've been there, you've seen him in person and his students and the great things that they do. They have a very good program with lots of students and growing at astronomical scales. They went from a tiny little program to programs that now has almost 100 students enrolled and keeps growing. So they are growing so much they need another building, and they are building another building just for that program. But even though he denies it, I am convinced that he is part of Skynet. I think he is trying to debunk that myth, but we'll see what he has to say about that. And then we have two other presentations, one by Lorraine, who everyone knows now, Knows and Loves. She is driving a number of programs in the community, including our internship program. So she will tell us a little bit more about the programs that she's running right now and the things that we are doing, again, to engage more people in the community and to continue to grow the community. And last but not least, Richard Taylor, who, again, everyone knows and loves in the community. He will tell us about an interesting way of dealing with a particular problem. And this is something that came up in the forums. And he has a good practical, as usual, Richard, and an interesting way to solve that problem too. So without more preamble, I'll pass the floor to Ty, and he can take his agricultural project now.
Thank you very much, Flavio. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for the invitation. I'm really excited to talk to you about some of the really neat things that some of the young kids are working on. I have a great number of students working on some pretty high-level things, and it's really great having the connection with HPCC. It's been really, really instrumental in moving our program forward. I did want to start with a quick poll for the audience, one that's really important to me, I think, as a teacher of 18 years. There are different ways of reaching your students. So the quick poll question is, what is the best way to prepare students for a future that's constantly changing? So I'm really interested in people's takes on that, and I'll give you a little bit about my view. An outline for the presentation that I'm going to give today. A little bit, I'd like to start with a history of our program at American Heritage School here in Delray Beach. Also our connection to HPCC systems and LexisNexis. A little bit about the project we did last year with our autonomous golf cart project. And then getting into the real focus of what I'm working on is how to prepare students for that ever-changing future. Then we'll lead into the project that we're working on this year and the reasons behind that. So the agricultural project, the autonomous agricultural project, is one that we're really excited about, and I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. A little bit about the history of our program here at American Heritage. Flavio was talking about the rapid growth we've had. I started a high school robotics team in 2015, a year after we started the program. I started that with about 6 kids. We had a really successful year for our first year and won some awards. As we progressed through, we've really had a lot more influx from real high-achieving students, and we've attracted some great kids. This year we wound up winning our first tournament, and we placed very well in some additional tournaments and made it to the World Championships, where we were finalists in our division, the Roebling division. So it was a real coming of age year for us, and it was a very exciting one. And also to go with our growing program, as you were saying, the school is very forward-thinking and very involved in our program, and a new building is actually currently being constructed right now that'll almost quadruple the space that I have to work with state-of-the-art computer labs, additional science and physics labs, and then my robotics lab will be a good 2,200 square feet. So I'm really looking forward to moving into that one. Our connection to LexisNexis and HPCC systems came about in a real organic way. It was a real great opportunity we had to give a presentation at the Boca Raton office about what we were working on with our current season. That was our sophomore year in 2016. We brought our project in, one of our prototype robots that we were working on for the competition season, and the students were able to give a presentation to industry professionals, which was a real exciting opportunity for them because it really validates the work that they're working on when other people are taking interest in that. And I think that was a really big growth moment for us as a department and as a program here at the school. This partnership has really blossomed over the past few years, and that led into our autonomous golf cart project that we finished and presented at the Community Day last year. And then this year, the focus really came about is a lot of, after a number of conversations I had at the Community Day about where we would go for the next phase of this. So we wanted to keep a number of things similar, work on a similar task, but with a slightly different focus, and that led into this year's competition or our project. This is a picture right here of the sponsored autonomous golf cart. It might be hard to see in the picture, but we were pretty ambitious with our project. We wanted to go straight for it. Since it wasn't going to be driven on the road, we went straight for level 5 automation, which, as you can assume, provided a number of challenges that we were able to deal with in time. We took the chassis and refurbished this and changed this so all of the controls were using gearboxes that we made, linear actuators to control the acceleration and the braking. And then all of the guidance we mapped out using a Google cartographer. And then the main navigation was a GNSS system based, on a GPS type format. It was able to navigate using LiDAR and stop using an ultrasonic sensor. It was a very ambitious project that had a number of challenges, but the kids were really up to that, and we had a great time working on it, although we did decide to go slightly smaller for our next challenge, and that led into a great opportunity. This is a picture from our community day. So as you can see, some of my students, they're presenting the car that they're standing in front of, so we did put the insert there, but just an amazing group. I had 5 students that were working on that. This year, with so much interest from other students, we've had about 16 people express interest and start working on this year's project. If you do have a little bit more interest in this, or you want to find more, there is information out there. We have a YouTube video highlighting the project itself, and some press releases that are out there as well. One of the big things, in getting back to my poll question, is as a teacher, I really feel my job is to prepare my students for the next step. With the robotics program, obviously we have a more focused approach in the science and the technology aspect of everything, but how do you teach to a student for a skill set that may not be out there, or there might not be a job yet developed? And I think our big focus is, what skill set do the students leave with? And I think there's a misconception that the students have that we are really far more advanced than we may actually be. I think we're making great strides, but as I put in the slide, you get new phones out, and there's a new update, and technology is coming at us rapidly, but we're not yet ready to let loose of the reins, so to speak. There is still that uncertainty, and as you see with autonomous cars, there are challenges, and we're reading about those daily. And in getting back to Skynet, it might be close, but I don't think we're quite there yet. And I will say that on the record, I am not part of Skynet yet, anyways. As a teacher, I always look back to the question that I had when I was younger, and students tend to ask, when are we ever going to use this in our life? When I was younger, I was never really impressed with the answer. And I think the great thing for me is I don't get asked that question. The students really understand the reasoning behind these projects, the need for the data that we're going to collect, and for some of the technology that we're going to be working with. It's a really useful and relative topic of study. And I think that makes it a lot easier for what I'm doing. It really makes the students motivated to work on these projects. So the Autonomous Agricultural Project, the why part, that was really when we started looking at the next phase of the partnership with HPCC, is what would our next project be? And I really wanted to keep that same autonomous driving component, but a little bit more of a focused approach. And one of the things that we saw when we were in the community day, we saw a poster that was talking about growing population and the need to become more efficient in producing food for that. So when we came back to the lab, we started doing a little research, and I did put that in there. You'll find that on Monsanto's website or wherever you're doing the research, that the population's growing and the available land to produce produce is shrinking because it's the easiest to build on for housing, for developments, and what have you. So our focus was, how could we create a robotic device that would allow farmers, owner-operators to gather more data and help increase the productivity of their yield, of their fields. So the overview of the autonomous project, I have pretty much narrowed that down to a really good core group of 6 students that are able to dedicate a tremendous amount of time to this project, and an additional 4 or 5 students that are going to be working on different aspects of this. There were a lot of challenges that we addressed when we started planning, and I think that was what we wanted to break these down into manageable parts. The first one, the big challenge would be creating a robotic chassis that's going to be able to move and not get stuck, and also not compact the soil negatively in some of these tests. We will also be mounting a number of sensors on there, so we have to have it robust enough to hold everything. And one of the big challenges is really loading this up with sensors, collecting data from the environment, whatever the farmer may need. Another big one we wanted to do was collect soil samples, and I'll talk more about some of our research coming up, but we had an opportunity to get in touch with people in the industry to really find out what specifics they would like our robot to focus on, and that helped us narrow down a little bit of the scope of the project. In addition, we are going to employ the use of a drone for aerial photography to give more of a big picture side as well. The research for this project, one of the really great opportunities that we had early on was a phone conversation with Jeff Bradshaw, and he's the CTO at Adaptris Pro Agrica, which uses HPCC. So it was a very relevant topic for us to talk about in this conversation, and he was able to really help us guide a little bit more from an industry side. And really up to that point, we were doing all of our research on the internet, and we didn't have as much of a focused goal at that point. And that really, throughout that conversation, allowed us to narrow down some key points and really help with the research side. From that point on, we actually were, let me go back to this one, given a really unique opportunity. I made contact with the Florida Department of Agriculture, and they helped put together a field trip for us with my students to visit Duda Farms in Belle Glade. They're a very large production. They actually produce celery, radishes on a very large scale. And this really gave us an opportunity to learn more about the production side of things. They are definitely an organization that is producing a large volume and already doing things extremely efficiently. So we were able to find out from an organizational standpoint some of the things that they did to increase their yield, and perhaps some of the things that they wanted to continue working on. We were accompanied by Camilo Gaitan with the Florida Department of Agriculture, and we've been able to stay in touch really for more information gathering, and that's been extremely rewarding. I think from this research, one of the big things that we found, if we were going to start collecting data, some of the areas were pest infestation. When would you apply pesticides, if it would be local over the entire crop. For longer term crops, knowing when the product is ready to harvest. Not everything harvests at the same time. Strawberries, blueberries, for example, are going to have variable times when they're ready to harvest. So if we had a robotic device going up and down the fields, giving visual data back and letting us know perhaps there are certain areas that are ripening at different rates. Monitoring soil conditions seem to be the biggest challenge facing farmers, or one of the more important things for us to address, and that is going to be a big focus of our project. Moisture content, nutrient content, and even the composition of the soil is something that is really a big impact on the growth rates of the produce. The other thing we were looking at too is monitoring the growth rates of the plants themselves, finding internodal length, comparing that to what a perfect healthy specimen would be, and understanding the time frame and seeing if those factors are affecting the growth. These are some pictures of the great group of students that I took with us to Duda Farms. They really went there with an open mind. They were able to ask questions after the presentation. And like I said, it was just a great opportunity for me as a teacher to get the students part of the process and not just working on the final product. So the student involvement, and this is really where the core part of the project comes out. Since I already have a robotics program, we modeled it after the same way that I model our competition team, and we break that into departments for students that are excelling in those areas. So I have a mechanical department where students will work on the drivetrain. That'll be the CADing, the 3D printing, the CNCing of the parts, everything, the nuts and bolts of the project. We also have an electrical division where all of the wiring will take place, all of the soldering, all of the installation of all the electrical components. But more importantly, somebody will be developing electrical schematics of this in CAD so we can go through and troubleshoot if something does go wrong. And then the last two are really intertwined. It's the programming, the big picture of this, and then the sensors and controls will work, really those two groups are going to work extremely closely together. Each of these departments are going to have their own individual tasks. Throughout the summer we will be meeting weekly to make sure that we're all on the same page, we're not stepping on anyone's toes, and this will lead into our testing phase, which will take place at the beginning of our school year. And we'll actually have an opportunity to test this out at Duda Farms right here in Florida. They're going to provide us with an acre of land, and we will be able to go out and run tests. Now, before that, we'll be running tests on our campus. We'll turn some of our lovely grass into maybe some perforated soil. The autonomous project itself, just to go over a little bit of the specifics, the programming, we've decided to use C++ as the main programming language, and then the robot, the guidance for this, we'll be using ROS, or the Robot Operating System, that also supports C++, and that's really a programming decision. Our lead programmer, Aramis, is going to continue working on this project through an internship this summer at HPCC, and this really gives us a good opportunity to continue the work from last year. As far as the sensors and controls for this go, our lead programmer, Aramis, has decided to continue use with Google's Cartographer and the simultaneous localization and mapping, where we'll be able to have an overview of the area that we'll be navigating within and pick out key points for it to go to. We'll also make use of gyros, accelerometers, our range finders, the LiDAR and ultrasonic, as well as encoders on all of the drivetrain. The ultrasonic sensors are going to be used primarily for object detection and preventing collisions. Let's say if there is somebody walking the fields, we want to make sure that safety aspect is there as well. Really the last part of it, I think, is probably one that has the students really excited, is the use of all of the cameras, but the VR component as well. So we are going to be using a 360-degree camera that will be mounted on the robot, and we will employ the use of a VR headset. So although the robot will be driving around autonomously, the owner-operator could put on a headset if, let's say, there's some feedback of an area of concern on the field, and they would be able to take over the controls and perhaps look at an area a little bit more closely. We're also going to have some robotic arms attached to the device, so during that time the owner-operator could then take the robotic arms and take a soil sample or a leaf sample, fruit sample, whatever they did prefer. In addition to that, the cameras are going to be used primarily for data collection. So we will have some opportunity to, we'll put cameras on all corners of it. We're going to be looking for really the leaf to see if there's any fungus or pest damage to it, or any yellowing that might indicate poor health. In addition to that, we were going to put QR codes at certain places on the field as markers to give instructions for the robot to do something at that point, whether it's drop off a soil sample at a certain location or perhaps go back to its charging station. The really great part of the project is how far the students can take it at this point. We have a really great basis for our project and what we're hoping to do, but it's really just one additional step in this long journey that we're going to be taking, and this partnership with HPCC has really led into a lot of great opportunities. Another quick poll question that I have is, do you have a good use for an autonomous robot? As we are looking for the future, we would really like to stay in this field of autonomous programming and autonomous robots. So we are looking at a lot of those questions from the audience to see if there are some great things for our students to do in the future. We do have Aramis spending the summer as an intern, which we are extremely excited about that opportunity, and you'll hear more about that coming up. But I thought, it would be a great opportunity for me to, answer those questions that some of the audience has. So let me look through some of these. Oh, there's some great questions here.
All right. Thank you, Ty. So while you have a moment to review the questions, Ty, we're going to go ahead and take a quick peek at the results of your first poll. So the question was, what is the best way to prepare students for a future that is constantly changing? And it looks like 40% said real-world examples, and 40% said all of the above, so all of the options that you mentioned. And we've got 20% coming in at internships. So it sounds like, there's a lot of really good options, and certainly, Ty, you covered several really good things in your presentation. Okay.
I think one of the biggest things that we really don't know, and what I want to do with my students is give them as many opportunities to have that hands-on experience and be part of the process. We can't predict what the future is going to have in store for them, but if we lay that foundation, I think they're in really good shape. Now, I went through some of the questions. If you have some additional ones.
No, let's go ahead and do the questions. Let's start here. Here's an awesome one, Ty. Will we see you on BattleBots this season?
Yes, actually, I did have a great opportunity to participate in Season 3 of the reboot of BattleBots on Discovery Channel. So they are airing every Friday at 8 p.m. And our specific match will be not this Friday, but I believe the upcoming Friday, the 24th or the 25th. They do have behind the scenes, and every once in a while we'll see our smiling faces pop up in some behind-the-scenes stuff, but we should be on a number of the episodes, and I would recommend catching them all. That's how we keep everything in check. We need to let the robots know that it's still us in charge.
All right, fantastic. Could you take a moment to talk a little bit about the role of HPCC systems on all of the projects and how it's being used?
I think the big help with the connection is that we build robots, and we've done very well when it comes to the mechanical side and the programming of a robot to get from point A to point B, to interact with its environment. But what we're doing and our goal for this project is so far beyond where we are right now that having the connection with HPCC allows us to work on a platform to take this massive amount of data from all of these sensors. And I think one of the big things with what Aramis will be doing is trying to narrow that down and really consolidate the information into something that would be usable for somebody that is not as programming driven or tech based in that area. So if somebody could look at a map and all of the data that were collected is put on a map of a field that would really put it in easy to digest terms. So having that connection, I think, is extremely crucial for us to take this to the next level.
Okay. Here's another question. Will your students be doing the analysis on the soil samples that are collected?
It's a really good question. In fact, that was one that came up in our discussions. A big discussion that we had with the farmers was, what is the process? What do you have to do to the soil to get the information you're looking for? And one of the big challenges with that is the amount of preparation that you have to do to the soil to get that ready for analysis. So we did do a little research, and one of the big things for the analysis, the soil has to be sifted through, so there's no irregular pieces, uniform size, and dried completely, ground up, and then the analysis can take place. For us, I think it was beyond the scope of what we would be able to do effectively, so we wanted to focus on the collection. So what we'll be doing is collecting soil samples and GPS marking those with the coordinates, and then we will be putting those in a box, and each sample will be individually labeled. And that's what we're looking at doing, is taking the task that would take place during the day and having the robot run at night, so it's able to work when everybody else is sleeping.
All right, fantastic, Cy. Really exciting. We've had several people say that they do have a good use case for the autonomous robot. So after today's presentation, we'll be able to go back and see who selected yes. If you are watching this after the fact and you have a good use case, please drop us a note. You can send it to techtalk@hpccsystems.com. It's the same email that was on our entry welcome slide. So please drop us a note, and we'll make sure that we get that over to Ty. Ty, we really thank you for your time today, and we really value our partnership with you. So thank you so much for coming and joining us.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a great partnership.
All right, wonderful. So Lorraine, at this time, I'm going to hand the controls over to you to talk to us about our interns and the projects that they're going to be working on this summer.
Thank you, Jessica, and hello to everybody. Before I start, I have a poll question for you. So I'm interested to find out how many of you knew the HPCC Systems intern program existed, and we'll catch up with those results a little later on. So I want to first look at some characteristics of this year's intern program. Our aim is to attract highly motivated and talented students who are interested in completing a challenging coding project, and they come from across the academic spectrum. This year, half of our students are male and half are female, so while women may be significantly underrepresented in the tech industry as a whole, this is not the case in our intern program. Any student from any recognized academic institution is eligible to apply, and while you will notice that most of this year's students are US-based, the program is available to students across the globe in any country where LexisNexis has an office presence. And indeed, a number of our students are international students from other countries such as China, Jordan, Sri Lanka, and one student is located in India for the duration of their internship. We have hired one intern from our program so far this year, and we are actively looking across our business for other potential employment opportunities for students who may be looking. Not all are looking immediately though. A number of our students intern with us to support their continuing studies, and we often have returning students on our program. University students are given the choice of whether to work remotely or from a LexisNexis office if there's one close by to them. High school students generally work from a LexisNexis office location. We feel our younger students gain more from being totally immersed in that office environment because it's probably their first experience of working life. And this year we have an even split of students working remotely and from an office. We have well over 25 volunteer mentors registered on the program. 15 are actively mentoring this year. And we're welcoming some new mentors to the program for the first time, including a number of professors from our academic partners and colleagues from the wider LexisNexis community. So it's a truly collaborative program. We estimate that it takes about 10 hours a week to mentor a student. So it's with thanks that I give to our mentors for giving their time and commitment to support all our interns. So this is the list of projects for this summer. I'm going to look at each one briefly in a minute. The first project is slightly different to the rest in that it's part of an initiative located in one of our business-facing teams within LexisNexis. Projects 2 through 5 are HPCC systems platform related, and projects 6 through 10 are machine learning related. You can see that we offer a good spread of projects across a number of disciplines, and we also accept projects suggested by students themselves as long as their work leverages HPCC systems in some way. And the red asterisk that you can see on the slide indicates which projects fall into that particular category. It's quite a challenging list of work, and every year I'm impressed by what our interns can achieve in just 12 weeks. And I want to say that once they've got themselves established, I usually blog about their progress, so look out for that on our website. So the next 5 slides show 2 projects each. I've created Jira tickets where relevant for each of these projects, and if you have an account, you can become a watcher to keep in the loop on what's going on in each of those projects. So let's start with Nicole. Nicole joined us in January and completed her internship just a few weeks ago. Her project included creating visualizations from the data mentioned on the slide. And I want to congratulate Nicole because she returns to LexisNexis next week as a full-time employee on Joe Pritchard's team. And I'm thinking in a few years it will be interesting to see where her career has taken her since her HPCC Systems internship. Moving on to Matt, he's been implementing a number of math functions to be included into our ECL standard library. While the ones he's implementing are already available in the standard C++ libraries, they're not easily reachable by an ECL developer. If you're an ECL developer and you want to see what he's implementing, then I suggest you go to the Jira ticket because the full list of functions is held within that ticket. Matt completes his internship with us tomorrow, which means that these functions may in fact be available in HPCC Systems 7.0, which is scheduled for later in the year. He's been a great asset to the team, and I wish Matt well as he completes his studies. Belinda's MPI Proof of Concept project is greatly anticipated by the platform team. Although MPI is now the industry standard, it wasn't when we were first designing and implementing HPCC systems, in particular our Thor cluster. It was quite unstable in those days and considered a bit risky, so we built our own solution, which serves us very well. But we have been curious for some time about how MPI compares with our solution today. So having Saminda on the team is a really great opportunity to have someone focus on finding out the answers to the questions that we have. Robert Kennedy's neural network training project may well support the continued work on 2 projects currently underway as part of our academic program. Firstly, the project Dr. Koshgoftar and Robert are working on together relating to multimedia big data processing using HPCC systems. And secondly, Dr. Yaiki Go and Jingjing Zhang from Imperial College London are working on a project using HPCC systems with TensorFlow. But the results of Robert's project will be of interest to anyone who intends to use neural networks with HPCC systems. Lily Zhu joins our intern program to contribute to our machine learning library for the 3rd year running. The machine learning algorithm she will be implementing this year will be a useful addition for those who want to analyze documents to determine the probability distributions for each word for each available topic. Now, I've posed a question on the slide underneath Farah's topic, and it's not as easy to answer that question as it may seem, because there are many variants to take into account for this project, such as matching plural and singular forms, language variants, punctuation evident in acronyms and the use of initials, and alternative spellings such as colour with and without the U. Dr. Apan, who is a mentor on both of these projects, and her Clemson University team are working on a number of machine learning related projects as part of our academic program, which highlighted the potential for these additional project opportunities. Both Lily's CLDA and Farah's TechSearch project are a reflection of how our academic program supports our intern program and vice versa. The Taylor Philadis project includes the implementation of different time series distance measures as part of the extension of k-means clustering and the KNN classifier. She will also be implementing different imputation techniques and normalization methods to be used in the case of missing values. Moving on to feature selection, which is used in data mining to filter out irrelevant and redundant features from those which are the most predictive. Hamdi's implementation is likely to be a popular addition to our machine learning library, since feature selection promotes a better understanding of the data, it reduces the cursor's dimensionality, speeds up the learning process, and generally improves the model's performance. You may have noticed that we have a number of machine learning related projects running this summer, 6 in fact. So if that's your area, you might want to take a closer look at the JARA tickets, which give far more detail than I have time to go into today. Using Jayashree's contribution, ECL development teams will be able to set up systems that automatically build and deploy their code when it's checked into Git. And I'm sure that ECL developers listening today will be very happy to hear that her work will significantly simplify the code validation process for them. And moving on now to Aramis. Aramis Tantalus is the programmer for the robotics team at his school, which is run by Tyra Donovan, who just spoke about their exciting and ambitious projects. There are many robotics projects out there collecting big data, which needs processing. Aramis's APIs will not only help his own school's project, but also any other robotics project with similar needs using the most common robot sensors. Aramis is our youngest intern this year. He will graduate high school next year, and it's clear that he already shows great promise as a future software developer in the making. There are many software developers I know today who started out in their teens, so it feels very appropriate that our program supports high school students like Aramis. So now I just want to talk a little bit about the experience. There's a framework for the intern program which is designed to help students and mentors set up what they need so they can focus on the projects and feel supported during the coding period. The welcome meeting kicks off this process by helping mentors and students to check that they're ready to begin, and also so they can establish a communication plan. Our intern program simply would not be the success it is without our mentors. Research and development is, well, it's a tricky business. Sometimes projects don't go to plan. need to change direction on the fly. Sometimes they don't work as expected at all. Our mentors also know how to make sure that the work being done connects well with our system. And it's precisely this experience and knowledge that is a huge asset to the students. Regular meetings, weekly reports, student blog journals, and evaluations are some of the mechanisms we have in place to facilitate the regular and effective communication, which helps students and mentors to track progress. Our interns and mentors also contribute to our community in many ways, as you can see here. One of our students presented at our last Tech Talk, and a number of past students have presented on the main stage at our Community Day Summit. US-based interns are also eligible to enter our poster competition held at the same event, alongside other students working on projects as part of our wider academic program. And last year, our high school student placed second, and one of our PhD interns placed third in that contest. Students are also encouraged to write a public blog journal tracking their experience and a final presentation to showcase what they have achieved. These are great takeaways for showing to professors and potential employers, as well as interesting sources of information for our community users. And over the years, many academic papers have been published as a result of support from our academic program. This list is growing all the time, showing how HPCC Systems has and continues to contribute to important research in the areas of high-performance computing and big data analytics. So if you haven't seen the list, go and take a look for yourself, and if you have seen it, keep checking back because I'm still adding to it. So now on to our next poll. You've heard a little bit about the mentoring role, so I'm wondering, would you be interested in becoming a mentor for an HPCC Systems intern? So I want to talk a little bit about how else you might want to get involved with the program, because there are many ways in which you can do that. So the most obvious one is become a mentor. We're particularly interested in increasing the number of machine learning mentors to help us meet the demands of what is an extremely popular area with students. But if you have a project idea of any kind, would like to see it implemented by a student, and are also willing to be the mentor for it, even better. And if you're interested in any projects you have seen today, remember to add yourself as a watcher in Jira and keep an eye on our blog for updates. You can recommend our program. If you want to know more about it, you can visit our student wiki, which also includes a PDF of our flyer, which you can use to display on your message board or send to students who may be interested in tackling a challenging coding project. You could volunteer as a judge at our poster contest. You'll meet each entrant, hear their presentation, and ask your questions to get all the information you need to score each student based on the contest judging criteria. And if you use the link shown on the slide, you can see details of previous contests. Tell us about your paper. The variety of papers produced is pretty inspiring, and we would like to share them with our open source community. And as I close my presentation, I want to say thank you to the students and mentors who have completed their projects already this year, and welcome to all the students and mentors whose projects are just about to start. And finally, there's one more poll question for you. Do you have an idea that might be suitable for an intern project? So Jessica, I'm ready to hand back over to you now for poll results and questions.
Fantastic. All right, we're going to take a moment to look at your very first poll, which was how many of you already knew about the HPCC Systems intern program. It looks like 85% of you on the line today have known about the program. So Lorraine, excellent job getting the word out about that. And 14% were not aware. So hopefully the new people that are aware, hopefully Lorraine's given us some great ways to be involved. And hopefully all of the people on the call today will be able to take advantage of some of those. We certainly welcome any participation. Right. So, Lorraine, we have one question in from the audience here. The question is, what projects in the past have been put to use at LexisNexis?
Right. Well, I would like to say that all of the projects that we have had students mentor on have been put to use in some way, or at least there is a plan to do so. I mean, that is the point of the project. We want them to produce a contribution that can go into the code base so that everybody else can take advantage of it. And the fact that they work with our mentors very closely means that there stands a greater chance of being able to have something that is actually of great benefit to everybody who might want to use HPCC systems. We have some Unicode project that was worked on by a student last summer. He worked on some for the standard library. And those, I think, are going in for 7.0. I've been seeing some of those being ticked off going into the code base. And so we are also using a project from last year from a student who is creating the ability for us to automate the generation of documentation for our machine learning library. And as I said, MAT's standard library functions also stand a good chance of going into 7.0. So it's great that we get these projects that give us these extra opportunities to add more features into our code base.
All right, Lorraine, why don't you take a peek at the questions there? And anyone in the audience, if you have a question, please go ahead and send it in. I think we have a few more moments for Lorraine. But looking at the feedback from the audience, the votes that have come through on those last two polls, so asking the question, would you be interested in becoming a mentor for an HPCC systems intern? And then the second one was, do you have a project idea that might be suitable for our interns? And for those of you that responded yes to those, we'll be able, after the webcast, to go and find you, and we'll connect you in with Lorraine. And if you are watching this after the fact, please drop us a note at techtalks@hpccsystems.com. And again, the email is listed on the first welcome slide of this deck, which you can download. All right. And so we do have another question that came in here. So Lorraine, the question is, can I still enter my HPCC systems project into the poster competition if I'm not an intern?
We have students that enter the poster competition every year that aren't actually part of our intern program. The majority of the students that enter poster into the competition are either an intern or they're working with one of our academic partners on an HPCC system related project. But if there are any students out there who are working on an HPCC systems related project and they're not part of our academic community, we would be very pleased to hear about that.
All right, fantastic, Lorraine. Thank you so much. And for those of you that are interested, the intern projects for us are a huge deal every year. And so we will have them report out in our August Tech Talk. So go ahead and put that on your calendar now. It'll be coming, I think, probably in the second week of August or the first week, somewhere in there, depending on schedules. But Lorraine, I, for one, am very excited to see those presentations. All right. So Lorraine, thank you for joining us today. And now I'm going to turn everything over to Richard Taylor, who's going to talk to us about his ECL tip, current longest event sequence by month.
Good morning. A couple of weeks ago, I was invited to come over to our office in Cardiff, Wales. And, let's start with the quick poll question, of course. Have you previously worked with any complex date handling requirements in your ECL projects? That's pretty much what I'm going to be talking about, a piece of code that is reasonably complex in working with dates. So let's have a poll on that. So the reason that this particular piece of example code came about is I was invited to come to the Cardiff, Wales office, and while I was there, I met a statistical modeler in the office who was brand new to ECL and extremely familiar with doing his modeling in SAS. And he wanted to know how he could accomplish this particular task. The problem is that he had data that had events that were logged in that data with the date of the occurrence of the event. And those dates could have been incomplete, but he needed to track which events occur consistently month by month. In other words, are they sequentially happening every single month, or are there gaps in what's going on? So the specific metrics he wanted to do was, for the current month, counting backwards from the current month, how many contiguous months has that event occurred? And he was only interested in the month itself and not necessarily which day of the month it happened. So if it happened on February 28th and it happened on March 1st, that was two separate months that it was occurring in. So that's the current sequence. And he also was interested in, within a given time frame, 5 years in this example code, what's the largest number of contiguous months that an event occurred. So that's the problem spec. And now let's go take a look at the, looks like I got to do the code share thing again and do this and get my screen to share. There we go. That's where I want to be. And I'll share that. And hopefully everybody should be able to see that screen now. What we're looking at now is obviously the ECL IDE, and the data is going to look like this. I've got three fields: an ID field, a source field, and a date field. As you see, my standard dates are YYYY MMDD format, and what constitutes an event is the combination of the ID and the source. So the code's going to start, as you can see, we've got three fields, an unsigned one ID field and a string 2 source field. These two are what comprise the event. For within an ID and for a given source, that makes an event. And now we want to know how many of these are contiguous. Our date range to work with, our starting month is going to be for the last 5 years, and this was happening in April, so I had April data. So from April 2018 back to May of 2013 is our 5-year span of time. And so the first thing I want to do, you notice that there were some 0 dates in there. I want to get rid of those, and I want to sort these by the ID and the source. So I'm simply taking my data set and I'm sourcing it, and I'm filtering that data set where I've got a full date field. In other words, I've got 8 digits in my date, and that date that I have in that field is greater than or equal to the starting month, which the starting month was, where it is, there it is, okay. The starting month was 2013-05 and adding 01 to it, okay. So it's greater than or equal to the first day of May in 2013. So I'm going to sort that, and this would be a fairly simple problem to do in a straightforward manner if we weren't a non-procedural language. So in order to work on a set-based context with this, I'm going to be using the group function. Now, the group function is one of those functions where we typically talk about this in relation to the fact that the group function may vastly increase your performance on large amounts of data, because the purpose of the group function is to take the data set that we're grouping by and the criteria on there, in this case, the ID and the source, and we're creating a set of subgroups where each subgroup is only going to contain those records with the same ID and source. So given the same ID and source, we're going to have ID 1 and source AA as one simple subgroup, because the whole point of a group function is to break up the subgroups so that the operations, subsequent operations on that group's data happens separately and independently on each subgroup. That means if you're running on a 400 node cluster, you're going to have at least 400 of these things going on separately and independently because you're going to be running at least one of them on each individual node at the same time. This is how you can increase performance. Okay, but in this case, we're not doing it for performance reasons. We're doing it simply to group them so that it makes the rest of the logic really simple and easy to write to look for the contiguous occurrences of the event on a per month basis. Now, I'm also using the halving function, which is going to be basically an SQL type of halving filter on this, because I only want to have the groups. I only want to work with the groups where the count of the rows in that group is greater than 1. In other words, if I've only got one record in the group, don't bother to work with it. It doesn't matter. And so the halving function is basically a filter on a per group basis. So in order to do that, so now that we've got everything grouped, I want to project my grouped data set, and I want to add two fields, a dist and a run. Well, I could do that with a project, or I could do that with the table function, either way. Either one of these works, and they both achieve exactly the same end. As a matter of fact, I did it both ways. This one was the project, and you can see that here's the graph for that project, and this particular work unit, this other previous work unit, I did with the table function. And you will note the graph looks exactly the same. So the generated solution by the compiler for both of these, whether I used project or table to add these two work fields, ended up being exactly the same C++. So it doesn't matter. Personally, I prefer doing it this way because that's less typing to do. But you can do whatever you want. Now, the key here is to calculate which months are contiguous and get the running totals of that. And to do that, I'm going to do an iterate, because the purpose of an iterate function is to operate with a pair of records at a time. The left record is always the previous result record from the previous iteration, and the right record is the next record in the data set. So therefore, I know that the first iteration, where my counter is going to be 1, is always going to be the first time through. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to iterate through that projected data set where I've now got my additional dist and run fields. And the dist is going to give me the distance between the months, and the run is going to tell me how many cumulative months in a row we have had at that time. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating a left date, which is going to be, if the counter is 1, if it's the very first iteration for each subgroup, I'm going to take the right date, the first 6 characters of that. Otherwise, I'm going to take the left date for 6 characters, and I'm going to add 01 because I don't care what day of the month this particular event actually occurred. I just want to know what month it is. And the function that I'm about to use here is this standardized date function called months between, which expects a full YYYYMMDD date. So my left date is either going to be the right date or the left date for 6, and my right date is going to be always going to be the right date for 6 plus the 01. So that these are the two parameters that I'm passing to this standardized date function, months between. Well, what does this function do? Well, you can see that this is one of the date functions that's documented. And so we've got in the documentation, the F1 documentation, standard date months between, from date and to date. And the dates are in a date T format, which is basically an unsigned 4 containing the integer value of YYYYMMDD date and the to date. And it's going to return that integer value of the number of whole months between the two dates. Now, the thing about this is that if I pass it February 28th as the from date and March 1st as the to date, it won't tell me that that 1 month has passed. It tells me that 0 months has passed. And that's the reason why I'm ignoring the actual date of the occurrence, because I'm only interested in the months in this case. So I am going to be finding what's the distance between the 2 months by calling that function. By the way, one other thing to talk about here for a second is you notice I made a point that the months between is a documented date function. There are a number of other date functions that we have not gotten around to documenting yet. That's in our ECL standard library, and you can see here's the actual code for that date function if you're interested. And there are also a number of other functions in here, and all of the functions in the date library do have the JavaDoc documentation. So even if the help file doesn't have a function in the help file yet, if you can go through this ECL library standard date function, which is available right there from the ECL library, std, the date function, and go through this, you will find that there may be some functions that you may find useful that are not yet documented. So that's something you want to watch out for. So now that I've got the distance between the months, now I want to determine what's the current run length on this particular thing. How many months has this pair of records gotten me up to? And I know that if the counter is 1, this is going to be the first iteration, so I'm going to start with 1. Then, if it's not the first iteration, then I want to determine is the left distance, in other words, did the previous iteration give me a 0 or a 1? And is the current distance, the self distance, 0? If so, then I just want to keep whatever the left run is, either 0 or 1, whatever that left run value is. Because the thing is that these, if you didn't notice it, let's take a look at the date, the raw group run data. Here's the date that we're actually working with, the dates that we're actually working with. And as you can see, 1 AA, 1 AA, that is April, and so is that. So we got to take into consideration the fact that we got a March, we got 2 Aprils, and we got a May, and we got a June and a July and an August. So this is what we're actually calculating with this, is the actual run length distance here. What's the distance between the 2 months? 0, and that starts with our run. We're on our first month, and then our second month is at 1. If the distance is 1 between these two, then we're going to have a 2. And if the distance is 0 between these two, then we're going to continue with 2. We're still at 2. And that's what this code is doing right here with this map function. So if the counter's 1, it's 1. Otherwise, we're going to determine is left distance 0 or 1, and the self distance is 0. Then we're going to keep whatever the previous one is. That keeps care of 2 events in the same month. And then the last one here is if the left distance is greater than or equal to 0, and the self distance is 1, then we're going to take whatever the run length on the left side is and add 1 to it. And that's exactly how we end up with this kind of run. 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8, and we can see here that the 1 AA has got a sequence here right at the very beginning of 8 months in a row. So that's our raw data that we want to determine. Now we want to get down to what the analyst is really interested in, and that is the data itself. What's the longest sequence in the group for each group, and what's the current sequence in each group? And to do that, the longest sequence, I'm going to take a table of the raw data, giving me my ID, my source, and the max sequence, getting the maximum sequence number out of there. And I'm going to sort that by the source and the ID. and I'm going to output that with the longest sequence per group, which is going to show us come on, you can show me the answer. There you go. And now we can see that for 1 AA, the longest sequence was that 8 that we found. For 2 AA, we found a longest sequence of 7. 2 DD, 1, 1, 1, 1, and 2 00 had a sequence of 2. So that gives us our longest sequences. The last thing that we wanted to know is what's the current sequence. So we're looking for specifically the table of that record data set where it's the current month. What's the latest guy in there? And we're going to output the current sequence per group. And that's going to tell me that nobody else but AA and 00 had a current sequence. And AA had a current sequence of 6 months in a row, and 00 had a current sequence of 1 month in a row. So that is the interesting data that the analyst was interested in. And let's go back to the slides. And we can move on to the last poll question. Now that you know that there's stuff in that date.ecl file, are you going to go look for stuff? Because there's, I guarantee, some useful date handling stuff in there. And with that.
All right, Richard. Thank you so much. That was a great demonstration. And it's awesome that it's, you know, a real world thing that you experienced while you were over in the UK. So that's wonderful. All right. So taking a quick peek at your previous poll question. All right. Let's see. All right. So the question was, have you previously worked with complex date handling requirements in your ACL project? And it looks like half of the folks that voted have. So that's great. And for the half that haven't, hopefully we presented something here that'll be helpful for you in the future. Nobody said not sure, so I guess that's positive there. And looking at our questions, so Richard, we've got a few of them here. The first one is, have you previously worked with complex date handling requirements in your ACL project? Oh, sorry, that's the full question. I apologize. Why? It's already one of those days. All right, going to our question. Why is sequential analysis important?
That's a really good question. And I'm a code jockey, so I'm a little more interested personally in the how to discover the answer. That's more of a statistical modeler type of question. So I really don't know the answer. I mean, obviously, we need to make sure that that we're discovering the information that our customers want to see, and that's all I got for that.
All right. Right. It looks like we have another question here. Do you typically post the questions and your answers in the forum?
Oh, yes. I and Bob Foreman monitor the community forums on a daily basis. And this particular question, having come directly to me from an interaction in the office, isn't going to be appearing on the forums. But otherwise, every answer that we post out there, it's there for everybody, because dissemination of to the widest possible degree of how you can accomplish things in ECL is what the forum is really all about.
Yeah, and just to put in a separate word for the forum, that is a wonderful question. And just so that you know, Bob, who's frequently on the show, Richard, several of our other developers are constantly in the forums. If you have questions, go out there. That is a wonderful place to either seek answers that are already there or to pose your own new question. All right, Richard, here's another question. I never knew of the halving function. is that something that you teach in ECL training?
Oh, absolutely. It's one of those functions. I forget exactly which course it's covered in, but we do discuss it. It's one of those things that's a little more arcane, and it's probably in one of the Roxy classes.
Okay. All right. Perfect. So check out the Roxy classes, and if for the person who asked that question, if you're unable to find it, please drop us a note. You can send it again to the techtalks@hpccsystems.com, and we'll certainly look. Trish is hiding in the background, and she's saying it's in the Advanced ECL Part 2 class.
Oh, thank you, Trish.
And the Roxy, I know. Trish is our silent, mysterious person in the background. All right, perfect. So one last question here, Richard. It looks like are inline transform structures more efficient than the standard transform end structure?
Okay. We've actually done some side-by-side type of things. The difference between an inline transform structure, as this particular code shows in that iterate, I did the transform inline, and in the project also I did the transform inline versus the table. And you notice that between the project and the table, the graph showed absolutely no difference between doing it one way or the other. And I didn't show the graphs for the difference between an inline transform versus a non-inline transform, but I guarantee there's absolutely no difference in the generated C++ code. So there is no performance impact on the difference between doing an inline transform versus a separate transform structure. Now, the productivity aspect of it comes into play, though, is if you're doing a transform structure that transform function that could be used by multiple different operations, given slightly different sets of data or whatever. The point being is that if you are going to be reusing the transform structure, then you always want to do that as a separate structure, so you only have to write it once. If you do it inline, then you're going to rewrite that every time that you actually do exactly the same thing. Did I lose you?
Thank you so much, Richard. Now I was just talking on mute. Anyway, very exciting news. I'm moving to the results of your poll question, and 100% of the folks that voted said yes, definitely. They will now be looking into the date.ecl file to see what's there. That is non-obvious for your future handling projects. So yes,
Yay.
Definitely, 100%. So well done,
Yay.
Richard. All right, fantastic. Thank you so much. And before we end today, we had a really good question come in from the audience for Lorraine. So Lorraine, if you're still with us, the question is it difficult to serve as internship director with individuals all over the world?
I think this is a really good question, but there is actually a very simple answer, which is no. But the reason the answer is no is because communication these days is so much easier that it's very, very easy to communicate with people all around the world. You do sometimes have to think carefully about organizing meetings across different time zones, but I haven't yet come across a situation where we haven't been able to manage that. And I guess that one of the reasons why it doesn't really occur to me to think that that might be a problem is because I work remotely from the rest of the platform team every single day. So I work remotely from my home. There are 7 of us in the UK and Ireland working remotely from home. There's a team in the Boca office. We work with others in Dayton, Ohio. And so we're all spread around the world, and we are all used to communicating with each other and our understanding as best as we can and when we remember about the different time zones. And so it's really, for me, no different than my regular working day. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say also that is part of the strength of this program too. It allows us to tap people from all over the world, and our mentors just work so closely and so strongly with everyone that it just gives us such a robust program.
Yeah, and our mentors are also dispersed all over the place too. They're not all in the same areas, and quite a lot of our students work remotely from their mentor every day. But that's why when you saw on my slides earlier, I had communication up there in capital letters. I think that the reason why the program works so well, despite what some people may perceive as a problem with working remotely, it does seem to work because we make sure that everybody is talking to each other and communicating effectively. That's what we on the platform team do every day.
Great, wonderful. Lorraine, thank you so much for hopping back on for that last question. So we're going to go ahead and wrap everything up now. Please submit a talk for our upcoming episode. We would absolutely love to have you. So whether you have a success story you want to share, a new use case, if there's something that you'd like to demo and share with the community, ECL tips or sample code, we would absolutely love to have you. Please just email us at techtalks@hpccsystems.com, and you can visit our wiki for more information. There's also a wiki out there for our intern program, and that is a wonderful place to go and gather more information on our HPCC Systems intern program. All right. We are looking at our summer schedule at the moment. We're contemplating having another Tech Talk before the summer ends. So stay tuned, watch the blog for more information, and a copy of this presentation and a wrap-up will be available within the next week. Thank you all so much for joining us today.